This video is literally going to be the #1 video for you to go ahead and master Flexbox time and time again. Trust me, it's the way that I learned it. Bro, the intro. Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. It's your boy Papa React. Before we jump into this one, this video was made possible by our amazing friends over at Skillshare. If you want more free content just like this, then make sure you take advantage of this offer. Check this out. Skillshare is an online learning community where millions of people come together to take the next step in their creative journey. The thing I love about Skillshare is that there are no ads. They're always launching new premium classes, and they also recommend really interesting classes. So before you know it, I'm actually no longer watching TV or Netflix. All I do is watch Skillshare while I'm actually eating my food. Most classes are under 60 minutes, so they should be able to fit any schedule, whether you're super busy or you've got a little bit more time on your hands. I've actually gone ahead and dropped the React Basics 101 entire class on Skillshare. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description are going to get a free month worth of premium Skillshare, and you're going to be able to, with that, access the React Basics which I've uploaded. On top of that, you're going to get access to thousands and thousands of courses available on Skillshare's platform. I've actually been checking out an amazing video editing class at the moment by Ali Abdal, where I was actually able to find out how I could use my iPad to add animated handwriting into my videos to level up my production value. And now I'm making the best use out of my iPad, as well as leveling up my Final Cut production game. So this is just an example of the amazing value that I've got since I've signed up at Skillshare. And if you guys want to go ahead and benefit from this just like I have, then go ahead and remember, the first 1,000 people to go ahead and grab that link are going to get 1 free month of Skillshare Premium, which means that you can access my React Basics 101 class. It's completely free. You have nothing to lose. And then after that, you can go ahead and continue if you're enjoying what you see on Skillshare. Without further ado, guys, let's jump into the ultimate way of learning CSS Flexbox. Now, what is CSS Flexbox? It's essentially a way that you can go ahead and style your websites, the layout of your websites in particular, to go ahead and be responsive, move children around on the page in ways that you expect. And instead of defining how far apart different children should be from one another, it's a way of just computing that by providing a set of rules to the browser. So if none of this makes sense, don't stress. I've got a simple game for you guys to go ahead and play. Yes, I said a game. So we're going to jump into it right now. First thing you want to do is head over to flexboxfroggy.com. So this is what you're going to see. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sonny, this is a game where there's literally a frog on my screen. What are you doing? Trust me, guys, it's the way that I learned Flexbox, and I'm telling you now, it's the best damn resource that is out there. So what you want to do, guys, is basically go ahead, start off at level 1. So they will give you a coding box over here, so you can go ahead and pop in your code, and then they give you this box on the right. Now, what you will be able to see is that this box on the right is essentially our container, right? So everything that you see here is going to be a container, and all of the rules that you write here are going to affect this container. Now, the lily pads are essentially just aesthetic, right? They're literally going to be a background image which is static, but the goal is that inside of this container, we have an HTML element, which is a frog, right? Now, the frog in this case, we're going to have to try and move around the frog by using different CSS Flexbox rules. And then we're going to basically not only complete the game by getting the frog over to his lily pad, but we're going to learn CSS Flexbox in the process. Now, so let's jump into the first one. So the first rule is whenever we use Flexbox, we have to set the display type to flex. This tells the container that we're trying to use Flexbox, and that we're going to be using different Flexbox rules to go ahead and move the children, in this case the frog, into the relevant position. So the first rule that we want to take note of is something called justify content. Now, this is basically how the frog should move on the horizontal axis. So if I go ahead and type in justify content, what we can do is we can pass in any one of these 5 properties. Okay, so the one that we're going to need here is actually called flex end, but I'm going to show you how this works. If I type in center, you can see I didn't have to say 50% left, 50% right spacing. Now all I do is just say center, and it will move that child into the center. But in this case, I want to go ahead and say flex end, and as you can see, I get the frog over to the lily pad. So this is level 1 complete. You can either hit Command Enter, or you can click Next to go through to the next screen. So level 1 done, guys, right? Trust me, it gets fun. At this point, we've got the same thing, but now we've got two children and we need to get both of these children to their lily pads, right? So in this case, if I do justify content, what you're gonna see now, guys, is that if I go ahead and did flex end, for example, you can see both children went to the end. Right? But in this case, you've also got amazing rules like space between, space around. But in this case, we're going to do center. And as you can see, we got both of the children into their lily pad. And this is literally the power of Flexbox. You are telling the container you're going to use Flexbox, and then you essentially just give it a set of rules which say, okay, this is how I now want you to position the children on the horizontal axes, right? So justify content on the horizontal axis, done. Right, level 3. So now we're going to go ahead and do something a little bit more interesting. So in this case, what if we want to have some spacing, right? So I want some spacing between these, but it's not evenly spaced and it's not spaced between, right? So if I hover over justify content, I can actually get a full set of the properties over here, and you can see flex start is default, and this makes sense because all of my children are at the start of the container. So in this case, I'm going to type in justify content, and I'm going to show you all of the different options that we can do here, right? So if I did space between, what you'll now notice is it provided space between each of my children, right? So each of my children now have space between them, right? But as you can see, we've still got this weird kind of gap here. So it's not space between that we're after right now. We also have space evenly. And as you can see, this gets a perfect amount of spacing evenly between all of the children components. So now they have an equal amount of spacing between them. Again, this isn't exactly the right answer because they're not sitting on their lily pads. We have a final solution, which is space around. And as you can see, what this is going to do is going to ensure that we have the correct spacing or spacing around each of the elements, right? So in this case, this gave us the desired result. So you can see there's loads of different ways to manipulate it, but as you can see, it works that out for us. And as the container resizes, it figures out how to go ahead and space your children. This is how we want our websites to be built, okay? So moving on to level 4. In this case, we've got justify content. So I'm going to use the previous one that I showed you. This one is actually going to be space between. And as you can see, bam, we get the frogs over to the lily pad. Level 5, we're going to use a new property, which is called align items. So you just learned how to do the horizontal axes. What about the vertical axes, right? So when I say vertical, I'm just mean up and down, right? So how do I now shift my children over to the bottom? So in this case, what we can do is we can type in align items. So justify content was horizontal, align items is the vertical, right? Trust me, it makes sense once you just practice this. So play this game over and over to get that repetition and muscle memory in. So at this point, by default, it's flex start, which is at the top. But if I went ahead and typed in center, for example, it moves it to the center of the vertical axis. And so as you can imagine, flex end will pop it to the end of the axis, right? And you can combine these rules. You can have a justify content as well to push it over to the right-hand side and so forth. But yeah, right now that is level 5 done. Level 6. Now, this is a developer's nightmare. This is one of those things when you're a beginner, you're like, how the absolute hell do I go ahead and center a frog on the page, right? Or not a frog, it could be anything, right? Every developer will come at this point where like, I just want my element in the center of the page. Well, this is the ultimate hack, right? Set the container to display flex. And what you want to do is type in justify content. And this is going to go ahead and say on the horizontal axis, I want to go ahead and center my element. And then you want to go ahead and say align items and hit the center inside of that property as well. And as you can see, it's centering on the horizontal and the vertical axis to the point, guys, where you can go ahead and resize your page. Really doesn't matter at this point. It's going to stay perfectly in the center like so. That's exactly a little nice hack that you should be knowing about, right? Rather than doing any margin kind of wizardry. So level 7, let's go ahead and jump into this one now. So let's use a couple of the rules that we learned before. And if you do forget, remember, you can hover over it, click into it to see a bunch of the different rules. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and say align items to go ahead and change this vertically to go to the end. I'm going to say align items flex end. Okay. And as I mentioned before, you can combine the rules apart with each other. So in this case, if I do justify content, and I do something like, let's see, space around. Let's see what we're doing now. Bam, right? We've got the horizontal spacing around, and we have the align items, which determines to push it down in the container on the vertical axis. So you can see this is how we are able to move our children around the container in a way that the browser does the heavy lifting. All we're doing is providing a set of rules to conveniently go by, right? Level 8, let's jump into this one. So by default, whenever we put display flex, you'll naturally find that all the children will go into a row. So if we didn't apply display flex here, guys, naturally everything is block, right? Which means that it's going to essentially stack up on top of each other. So the minute we do display flex, all of our children go into a row. This means that we basically would have, if we didn't have display flex, you would have the green would take up the entire row, the yellow would take up the next row, the red would take up the next row. But display flex has put it into a row for us. So what we can now do is we can actually manipulate the direction. So by doing this, we can actually change the way that we see it on the screen and the way that it appears. So if I go ahead and type in row reverse, it's going to go ahead and rather than left to right, now it's doing right to left, right? So we can actually completely flip the way that it kind of gets shown on the screen. We can also go ahead and change it to a column view, but we're going to have a little bit of practice on that in just a second. So row reverse is how we save the frogs in this level. Level 9. Right, so in this case, we're going to go ahead and mess around with that column. So we're going to say flex direction, and remember by default it's a row. So in this case, I want to change it to a column. Right, bam, looks good. Right, everything's looking pretty nice so far. We're also going to go ahead and manipulate a few other things now. So in this case, what we can see is that we have a reversed direction. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is type in flex direction, and I'm going to type in row reverse. Right, awesome. Now our colors are correct, but the spacing is not correct. So we are on the horizontal axis, but because we are in reverse now, our rules are essentially reversed. So remember, justify content had the effect on the x-axis, right? So justify content, if you remember correctly, the default rule was flex start, but because we're now using row reverse, flex start would now be on the right. So if we do flex end, it will now push it to the left, if that makes sense, because what we've essentially done is reverse the direction. So in this case now, if I go ahead and say flex end, it will push it into the original space, but reverse the children in their order. This is really powerful, guys, because you're literally manipulating the way that the HTML elements are shown on the screen without actually changing any HTML. You're doing it all from CSS. That's damn powerful. Right, next level. So this is where it starts getting a bit juicy, right? So first thing here, we're going to go ahead and change the flex direction to a column. So as we can see, it's more in a column, and then we can see it's pushed down towards the bottom, right? The next thing we want to do is go ahead and type in justify content, and here we're going to go ahead and say flex end. Right, and as you can see, what that's done is it's pushed it all the way down. Now you're probably wondering, whoa, justify content was horizontal, right? What's going on here? Well, no, because you changed the flex direction. Now justify content is vertical and align items is horizontal, right? So this is something which can be confusing, but all you need to know that by default, justify content is on the horizontal line and align items is on the vertical line. The minute you change flex direction to column, your justify content is now vertical and your align items are now horizontal, right? Once we understand that and it makes sense, it just takes a bit of practice, but you get the hang of it, okay? And if you remember, all you need to do is just literally play this game over and over and over again, and you will honestly get this, right? Try not to copy me when you do this. Play it for yourself and see if you can experiment. And that's honestly the best way of learning this. So at this point, I'm going to do flex direction. And as you can see, if I did column, it's simply not enough. The colors are reversed. The red should be at the top. So I'm going to reverse the direction, okay? And as you can see now, we've got a spacing issue. So remember, justify content vertical when we flip the direction. So justify content here, I'm going to go ahead and do space between. Right, and just like we noticed previously, it defines spacing in between our inlet elements and we get the desired result. So we're going to go on to level 13. Right, at this point we're going to go ahead and use a combination of rules. Okay, so first thing we want to do, get it in the reverse order. The colors are incorrect. Okay, so flex direction, I'm going to reverse it, and we're still in a row, so I'm going to go ahead and say row reverse. Okay, nice, our colors are in the correct order. The next thing I want to do is center my element. So we're still on the horizontal axis when we use justify content, as I'm still using row, not column. So in this case, I can say justify content, and I can center my elements, right? Nice. And then what we need to do is use the vertical modifiers, in this case, align items. And we're going to go ahead and push this down to the bottom. So if you can beat me to it, then awesome job. Smash that like button. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say flex. And just like that, 3 rules get our frogs into the position that they need to get into. This is really handy, honestly. This will start to help you understand how you can move elements around on a web page. It's really going to build up your CSS skill set. Trust me, it's worth doing this. Okay. Level 14, right? So this is probably something which a lot of people don't even know about who are using Flexbox for a long time. I was one of those people. So if you're using Flexbox, and let's imagine we have 3 children, okay? And what if we don't want to manipulate our HTML to basically go ahead and change the order in which they appear? So we've got the green, we've got the yellow, and we've got the red. But in this case, what if I want my yellow to go to the end of the list, right? Well, what we can actually do is apply something called the order property. So in this case, the pond has got display flex, and what we're doing here is they've targeted only the yellow, right? Only the yellow child with the class yellow. So in this case, every rule I apply here is only going to affect this yellow one, okay? So what I can do here is if I type in order, by default, every child has an order of 0. That means essentially just turn up in the order that you appear in the HTML document. So in this case, green, yellow, red, okay? But in this case, if I was to go ahead and give this an order of 1, you can see what it's done is the yellow one has basically gone ahead and pushed forward in the queue, right? So you can see we've got a bunch of numbers. 0 is the default. So 1 will push you forward in the queue. -1 will push you behind in the queue. So you can see, and initially I'm at 0. And if I want to go back a level, I just type in -1, and now I'm at the front of the queue. If I do 1, I go to the end of the queue. By default, I'm 0, where I should be in the HTML document. All right, so in this case, I'm going to put an order of 1, and now I've flipped it without modifying the HTML. That's really powerful, and it's something that you should know about. It comes in very handy in edge cases. Okay, so in this case, we have the similar situation, but we have to get the red frog over to the left lily pad. Now, you might be thinking, okay, order -3, right? Now, yes, that would probably work in this case. If we did it, order -3, now you can see it worked. But look at this, guys, order -1 also works, right? So order 0 is where we should be. Order -1 puts us also at the back. And you're probably wondering at this point, well, okay, I'm completely lost at this point. What the hell just happened, right? The reason for this is because we can use this to set an order. So let's imagine I wasn't just rearranging this one frog, okay? Let's imagine I wanted this frog to go back a level, but I wanted that one to go way back a level, right? Then what I could do is I could give this frog -2 to get up, basically say, I'm more important than you, so I need to go way at the front of the queue. So -2 is going to get the precedent, it's going to get the priority to go all the way to the front of the queue. -1 will then go over here. So you can set an order by doing it that way, right? Otherwise, if nothing else has a sort of, is competing against your order, then -1 will naturally go to the beginning of the queue, right? So really, really handy stuff to know about. Okay, so far, level 16, you've learned how to go ahead and manipulate all the children at once. So whether it's vertical, horizontal, the spacing. What if in a group of, let's say, 5 children, I just want to go ahead and change one of those children to be a slightly different positioned element. So in this case, you can see we've got a display box, we've got align items, flex start. So everything here is by default at the top. We're going to target the yellow one, and we're going to use the align self property. What this does is you have to target the individual component or the individual element, and here you want to go ahead and basically it accepts the same properties that align items accepts, except it only targets that one child. So if I do flex end now, as you can see now, we've got this awesome way of just shifting that one child element. So if you ever have one child in a group of children in a container and you want that one to only have its own rule and basically be spaced out, you can do that with align self. Okay, hopping over to level 17. So we're going to do a combination of order and align self. And this one is a little bit tricky, but trust me, it will make sense after a little explanation. So I'm going to type in align self. And here we're going to go ahead and say flex end, and we're targeting the yellow frogs here. So you can see, there we go. Now we're going to use the order property here, and it could be a little bit confusing. So listen to me. By setting the order of the yellow frogs to 1, what I'm about to do is say all the yellow frogs should go to the front of the queue. So what it does is it pushes the existing frogs which are in that queue or in that space. So if I was to go ahead and just show you on the same line, right, by setting the order of the yellow frogs to 1, it's basically saying all the yellow frogs have to go at the end of the queue. So it basically means that the green frogs have to go at the beginning of the queue. So order 1 does it like so. And then what you want to do is type in align self, and we're going to go ahead and say flex end. Right, so you can see what happened there. By setting an order of 1, it pushed our yellow frogs over to the end, and align self pushed only those downward. So level 18, we're so close, guys. Smash the thumbs up button if you've learned something new already. So at this point, what if we have loads of children inside of our container, but we don't want it to be squashed up like this? You're going to run into this a lot of the time, right? So what you can do here is you can use something called the flex wrap property. It can take 3 different options: no wrap, wrap, or wrap reverse. In this case, if I simply apply the wrap, you can see that it's going to not squeeze our children. It's instead going to say, just go on to the next line. So very handy rule to know about. Level 19, we're going to do a combination of flex direction and flex wrap. So in this case, I'm going to do flex direction column. As we can see, we're not in a row anymore. And as you can see here, I'm squashing all of the children in one column, which is not nice, right? So what I want to do now is to flex wrap. And as you can imagine, when we wrap, now it's in a column fashion. So essentially what it's going to do, guys, is it's going to go all the way down and it's going to run out of space. So it's going to start the new column over here, and then it's going to start the new column over here. So what should happen is it would space these ones out. Then it would bring these over here and push these down. And then it would run out of space, and then it would push those over here. So if I go ahead and say flex wrap, you can see they've gone ahead and wrapped instead of being squashed in a single line. Okay, so when we change it to column, that's how it behaves. Okay, now rather than doing 2 separate rules like flex direction and flex wrap, we can use this handy shorthand property called flex flow. Okay, and what this essentially does is the first argument here is if it's a row or a column. So in this case, I can type in column. And the second argument here is if it's going to be a wrap, no wrap, or so forth. So in this case, I can actually go ahead and say column wrap. Now with 1 line of code, I've got my desired outcome instead of writing 2. So jumping over to level 21, at this point now, I want to go ahead and show you that on the vertical axes, we can actually use a handy property called align content to go ahead and space out based on our requirements. So in this case, align content is basically very similar to justify content in the horizontal axes, but in this case, we can go ahead and do however we need to do it. So in this case, if I do flex end, you will see that everything will go to the end of the container. So by doing flex start here, you can see everything goes up to the top of the container. So anytime you see align content, justify content, it will be the one where we can space between, space around, flex start, flex end. It'll be that one. Okay, so if I was to do center here, you can see the same effect would happen, but everything would be centered. Okay, so handy little thing to know about. All right, level 22, same thing, align content. But this time we're going to do flex end. And as you can see, they go to the end of the container. So almost there, guys. Level 23, let's do this, right? So at this point, we need to just tackle the things that are obvious problems in front of us. Flex direction is wrong. So let's go ahead and do a column. So there you go. Now the colors are in the reverse order. The red seem to be down here. The yellow seem to be up here. So I'm going to reverse the order. So column reverse. And then the only issue we have now is that the spacing is all messed up, right? So remember, align content has now flipped because we're in a column. So align content, if I now do center, you can see that it applies a central positioning for all of our children, and we get the desired outcome. So you can see it's literally just a combination of all of these things, and all it takes is honestly practicing this game to master this stuff. This is how I learned Flexbox, right? So level 24, this is the challenge, right? Let me know in the comments right now below if you managed to tackle level 24 before I do it. So pause the video, give it a nice attempt, don't Google it, and then see if you get back. If you have, smash the thumbs up button. Let me know in the comments how long it took you, but we're gonna go ahead and tackle this one right now. So first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna type in flex flow. Okay, let's go ahead and see what we can do here. So I'm gonna say it should be in a column. Okay, so we're gonna say column, and I'm gonna go ahead and say, oops, I need to make it flex flow column, and I'm gonna wrap. Okay, so as you can see now, we've somewhat got what we needed, right? But in this case, firstly, I'm gonna reverse the column. Right? The reason why I reversed the column is because the red was on the wrong side. So the next thing I wanna do is, you can see the wrap here is in the wrong direction. So I'm gonna say wrap reverse. Okay, now you can see my green are in the correct place, my red is in the correct place, but the yellow are simply off. Right, so let's tackle this one next. So what I'm going to do now is I'm firstly going to go ahead and say justify my content, right? Justify the content, and I'm going to go ahead and actually try the center rule. And as you can see now, I've justified the content in the center on the vertical axis, right? This one hasn't changed because it's using up the max width. So the only thing left here now, guys, is to have a simple space between our horizontal axes. And because we are in a column, now the horizontal axis is going to be defined by the align content rule, right? So in this case, if I now do space between, this should space out my this should space out my horizontal axis. And as you can see, bam, just like that, we've done some crazy manipulation. We've gone from this all the way to this, right? Just by using CSS Flexbox. Incredibly powerful stuff. And you hit next, and guys, you have now successfully finished your Flexbox Froggy mini crash course. Trust me, let me know right now if you have learned something new with Flexbox. This is all it took for me to learn Flexbox. It took me, I remember somebody at my workplace said, give this a try. And I gave it a try and I was like, oh my God, okay. Now I know Flexbox. And it just took practice and practice, and honestly it became as simple as that, right? I would highly recommend you check out CSS Grid Garden. I'm going to be making a follow-up video on CSS Grid if you want to learn more about that. But give this a try. It's going to be the most fun, engaging way to go ahead and learn CSS Flexbox. It worked for me and it can work for you too. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you smash the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe. And as always, guys, it's your boy, Papa React. I will see you in the next video. Peace.